9. Keith Moses. 38-year-old Natasha Augustin stopped along a street in Pine Hills, Florida, to offer a young man a ride one day in 2022. And in response, he shot her and fled the scene. Several hours later, Spectrum News 13 journalists Dylan Lyons and Jesse Walden were shot nearby while covering the first shooting. Lyons died from his wounds, but Walden survived with critical injuries. The gunman then proceeded to a home a few streets over and shot a mother and daughter. Sadly, only the mother lived. Police identified the suspect as 19-year-old Keith Moses. He had no known connections to any of the victims except the first person he shot, and the motive behind his alleged crime spree remains unclear. Footage of the suspect's arrest shows several armed deputies approaching Moses on a street. He initially cooperated with their demands, then suddenly yelled, "They are killing me," as the cops handcuffed him. Moses then screamed that he couldn't breathe, but a deputy assured him that he could. One of the arresting deputies then speculated that Moses was on some sort of drug. The suspect now faces 3 first-degree murder charges, 2 attempted murder charges, and 1 count of armed burglary. There hasn't been a conclusion to the case yet, but hopefully Moses will get what he deserves. 8. Mark Brown. 34-year-old British escort Alexandra Morgan vanished in 2021 after traveling to a remote farm in East Sussex to meet a man who sought her services online. By the time her remains were found, all that was left of her were some charred bone fragments and teeth. While investigating Morgan's case, detectives zeroed in on a 40-year-old man named Mark Brown as their prime suspect. They discovered that Brown's girlfriend, 33-year-old Leah Ware, had disappeared just months earlier. The two had met in a similar fashion as Brown and Morgan, and for several months, Brown paid for Ware's apartment while carrying out the relationship behind his partner's back. No sign of Ware was ever found, but law enforcement believes that she met a similar end to Morgan, who was locked in a shipping container and kept alive for a certain amount of time before being murdered and burned. When police showed up at Brown's home to arrest him, it didn't seem totally unexpected. He remained calm as an officer explained what he was being taken into custody for and asked if he had anything to say. Brown declined to comment and cooperated with law enforcement. A jury convicted him of both murders, and as a consequence of his horrific actions, he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 49 years. 7. David Carrick. For 2 decades, an elite London Metropolitan Police officer named David Carrick terrorized an unknown number of women, using his job position to intimidate them into submission, forcing them to stay quiet about his abuse. One woman accused Carrick of threatening to plant drugs in her car if she stopped seeing him. He also allegedly threatened to murder the victim and told her that nobody would believe her over a high-ranking member of law enforcement. He also reminded her that he knew how to make evidence disappear. Other accounts described how Carrick degraded his victims for hours on end, in some cases forcing them to sit in a tiny cupboard while doing other horrific things to them. An investigation found at least 9 complaints that women filed against Carrick between 2000 and 2021, including reports of alleged assaults, but no action was taken. And the paper trail ended there when the women either dropped the complaints or declined to formally pursue action. In one case, Carrick was put on administrative duties, but kept his job, despite the seriousness of the allegations he faced. The case finally broke wide open in 2021, when a woman who met Carrick on a Tinder date reported his behavior. In footage of the arrest, the crooked cop seems annoyed to the point of acting arrogant, as if he couldn't believe some low-ranking officers were daring to take a 20-year-old veteran of the force into custody. Carrick's fall off his high horse only continued from there. He was ultimately convicted of 85 crimes against 12 different women, and was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 30 years. However, authorities believe there are more victims and are encouraging them to come forward. 6. Porfirio Duerta Herrera. 42-year-old Porfirio Duerta Herrera got a 3-day head start on his prison escape in September of 2022, thanks to the inattentiveness of guards who didn't notice that he'd replaced himself with a cardboard dummy. He'd used battery acid to wear away at the window frame of his cell, then ran past an unmanned tower and scaled the facility's perimeter fence. At the time of his escape, Duerta Herrera was serving a life sentence, or at least was supposed to be, for detonating a pipe bomb on top of a parking garage along the Las Vegas Strip in 2007. Unfortunately, as a result of the blast, a hot dog stand worker lost his life. Nevada Governor Steve Sisolak was outraged by the security breach, as well as the fact that nobody noticed Duerta Herrera had escaped until days later. A multi-agency manhunt ensued, and police caught up with the fugitive right as he was about to board a bus out of town, thanks to a keen-eyed employee who recognized Duerta Herrera and called 911. Footage shows officers closing in on the fleeing felon as he waited in line to board a shuttle bus. At first glance, nothing about him stood out. He was wearing new clothes and a baseball cap and had a backpack on. And in the video, an officer can be heard warning Duerta Herrera not to be stupid as they slap the cuffs on him and lead him over to a police vehicle. He didn't say much, but acknowledged that they had the person they were looking for, and admitted that he was trying to get to Tijuana. It's unclear how Duerta Herrera reached Las Vegas from the prison, which is located in the open desert northwest of the city, or how he got his hands on money to buy clothing and a bus ticket. Footage showed someone dropping him off in Las Vegas 2 days after his escape, but the driver hasn't yet been identified. And after he was captured, officials made the wise decision to move him to a high-security prison in order to avoid any incidents like this in the future. 5. Catron Jones. While responding to a domestic violence call during the early morning hours one day in 2022, Broward County Sheriff's deputies arrived at a home in West Park, Florida, to find a young man banging on the front door. Identified in an arrest affidavit as 19-year-old Catron Jones, the suspect allegedly showed up at the residence after his girlfriend found out he was cheating and decided she wanted nothing to do with him. The young woman told police that when he appeared at her door, she dialed 911 and went outside to tell him to leave. She claimed that Jones pushed his way inside, but that she managed to lock him out. Body cam footage shows a deputy approaching Jones with his gun drawn, as he instructs the suspect to stop kicking the door and sit down. Jones challenged the deputy and said he lived at the house. And despite his violent actions, his girlfriend told the responding officers that she didn't want him detained, just that she wanted him to go home. When a deputy approached the suspect and attempted to handcuff him, a struggle ensued, at which point the officer's body cam fell off. The woman who called the cops could be heard begging the police not to shoot Jones and to stop punching him. Other deputies arrived, and at some point, one of their cameras captured grainy footage of what looked like a deputy punching Jones while using a pair of handcuffs like brass knuckles. By then, the suspect was already in cuffs and was unable to defend himself. In early 2023, the Broward Public Defender's Office filed a complaint accusing the deputy who allegedly punched Jones with handcuffs of excessive force. According to the Sun-Sentinel, some experts have condemned the deputy's actions as excessive based on the incomplete body cam footage alone. Others, however, believe the deputies may have acted reasonably based on the possibility that Jones posed a continued threat, even if he was already handcuffed. The case remains under administrative review, so it's unclear whether any of the deputies involved in the incident will see consequences for their actions. 4. Cindy Taylor. Adult performer Cindy Taylor, better known as Jessie Jane, made headlines for reasons other than her talent in 2020 when she was arrested for allegedly punching and biting her boyfriend in a booze-fueled rage. Police were called to the couple's home in Moore, Oklahoma, where they learned that the two of them had started arguing after drinking together. When they arrived, they found Taylor's boyfriend bleeding in the driveway. The alleged victim told responding officers that he awoke to the 39-year-old throwing his medication in the garbage because she believed it was steroids. He claimed that Taylor reacted violently when he confronted her about the discarded pills. Taylor accused her boyfriend of picking her up by the neck and throwing her against a wall. But officers observed no visible injuries. And this wasn't her first run-in with the law involving alcohol-induced drama. In one incident that was captured on camera, she was found passed out drunk on a sidewalk, soaked in her own urine. After trying to get Taylor to call a friend or a cab to come pick her up for several minutes, the police got frustrated with her lack of cooperation and booked her on a public intoxication charge. Taylor told the Daily Mail that she only had 2 drinks that night and that someone had drugged her. She gave a similar explanation after she was filmed passed out and being carried down the Las Vegas Strip. She seems to be staying out of news headlines since her most recent arrest, though, and she's also retired from her performing career. 3. Velveteen Dream. In August of 2022, Orlando police officers responded to a report about an altercation at a local gym. Former WWE wrestler Patrick Clark, better known as Velveteen Dream, allegedly bit and punched an employee who asked him to leave a certain part of the facility that was closed for cleaning. Clark immediately demanded to speak to his lawyer after being handcuffed. When the officers didn't let him, he threatened to sue and erupted into a verbal tirade that continued through the entire ride to the police station. In footage of the arrest, the wrestler could be heard screaming so loudly in a squad car that an officer turned the radio up to drown out the noise coming from the back seat. He also shouted that he worked for WWE, although he'd already left his position with the company more than a year earlier. During another part of the video, Clark admitted to being a little inebriated. He accused an officer of failing to read him his Miranda rights, and he remained stuck on the topic for several minutes. At the police station, he continued to berate the cop, calling him a rookie repeatedly, and asking how he could have messed up on giving someone their Miranda rights. In the end, Clark was charged with misdemeanor battery and trespassing on property after receiving a warning, but the case was dropped when the gym employee decided he wasn't interested in pursuing the case. 2. Hope Solo. In March of 2022, police received a report about a woman passed out in her vehicle with the engine running. She'd apparently been there for more than an hour outside a Walmart in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. They arrived to find that the driver was 40-year-old Hope Solo, the former goalkeeper of the U.S. national women's soccer team. Body cam footage showed the athlete refusing to cooperate with law enforcement, while her toddler twins cried in the back seat of the car. Solo said she'd pulled into the parking lot to take a nap because she was tired, but the responding officer suspected that there was more to the story than she was claiming. He asked Solo how much she'd had to drink, but she denied consuming any alcohol and refused to exit her vehicle or take a field sobriety test. As a result, Solo was charged with driving while intoxicated, resisting arrest, and misdemeanor child abuse. She pleaded guilty to the DWI charge, but the other 2 were ultimately dropped. The judge imposed a 2-year suspended sentence and a 30-day active sentence, and she was credited with time served for spending a month in rehab. In a statement, Solo acknowledged her mistake and said she'd underestimated the damaging effects that alcohol had on her life. 1. Gerardson Mackey. When Ackworth, Georgia Police Chief Wayne Dennard spotted what looked like an unmarked police car one day in 2022, he didn't recognize it as a vehicle belonging to any known department that operates in the area. He saw the car making its way through traffic with its red and white emergency lights flashing and instructed one of his officers to pull it over. Body cam footage showed what appeared to be a retired police car that was still equipped with a lot of the gear that would have been used when it was still in service, including a caged back seat. And while it's not necessarily illegal to own one of these vehicles, it's against the law for someone to use the flashing lights if they're not actually a cop. The driver, 33-year-old Gerardson Mackey, was wearing a police uniform with patches that said Georgia on them. He also had on a utility belt, and he flashed a badge at the approaching officer. Mackey said the uniform was his private funeral escort company and identified himself as an off-duty highway emergency response operator, or HERO operator, for the State Department of Transportation. He was somewhat defiant at the scene when the police cited him for unlawful operation of an emergency vehicle. After some further digging, they revealed that Mackey had been fired from his Department of Transportation job before the traffic stop took place. And so, authorities charged him with one felony count of impersonating a public officer or employee. Would you rather go viral for throwing a tantrum that was captured on camera during an encounter with the police, or butt dial a member of your partner's family during a conversation with a friend about how annoying you think they all are? Let us know in the comments below. And if you like this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.